Kansas State versus Kansas. Kansas State is an 8-point favorite going on the road to take on the Jayhawks team that suffered a really disappointing loss to Texas Tech. That had to be one of the worst offensive performances that Kansas has had all season long. They only scored 13 points against Texas Tech. Kansas, normally when they're playing their best football, their offense is really explosive. They can generate a lot of big plays, whether that be in the passing game or on the run. Or on the ground game, excuse me. And you got two really good running backs. You got Devin Neal, who's averaging over 6 yards per carry, 10 touchdowns. You also got Daniel Henshaw, who's averaging 5 yards per carry. And the offense kind of runs through these two running backs. Jason Bean, he's pretty good, considering the fact that he was Kansas' backup quarterback. And he's a pretty solid quarterback. But he has a tendency to be really streaky at times. You also can't really trust his decision-making sometimes. Sometimes he'll throw a couple of passes that make you go, what the hell were you doing? And Kansas defensively, they can be inconsistent at times too. Statistically, when you look at this defense, you say this defense is dog shit. But at times, this defense can play good enough where they can bail this offense out at times. When you're going against Kansas State, however, though, you're going against a complete football team. This team that Kansas State has doesn't really have too many weaknesses. They're balanced offensively. Will Howard is one of the more underrated quarterbacks in the sport right now. They got good running backs. They got one of the best offensive lines in college football. They can beat you on the ground. They can beat you on the air. And they also got a really good defense. The only knock on Kansas State's defense is that their secondary is a little inconsistent and they don't have a consistent good pass rush. And that could hurt them against Kansas. You see, to beat Kansas, you got to neutralize them from getting a lot of big plays downfield. Something that they got a really good chance of being able to produce against Kansas State with the fact that Kansas State doesn't have a great pass rush. And Kansas State's pass rush could kind of cost them a game like this against a Kansas team that is pretty balanced offensively when Jason Bean is playing good football. You see, if you can slow down the run game and make this a game where Jason Bean has to make plays with his arm, you like your chances of being able to generate extra possessions. And sometimes in certain situations, Kansas coaching staff is really good, but sometimes they can kind of try to do a little bit too much. They try to outthink the room at times. I think that Kansas State has the advantage when it comes to their coaching staff and their defense. Offensively, both of these two teams are pretty evenly matched. Kansas State, they can beat you in a variety of ways, the same way Kansas can. They got two really good wide receivers. And their offensive line is also pretty good as well. But whose defense is going to get more key stops in this game? Because that's really what it's going to come down to. Kansas State, they have kind of more of a bend but don't break defense. They're really good in the red zone. They don't give up a lot of points, and they're really good at getting you off the field in third down situations. Kansas, their situational defense, non-existent. They can't get you off the field in third down. And if you get in the red zone, more times than likely, 9 times out of 10, you're going to come away with a touchdown. Because they got probably the worst red zone offense or the worst red zone defense in all of college football. They're 132nd at red zone defense. And I think that pretty much means they're the worst defense in all of college football in the red area. I think there are, 132 FBS teams, and Kansas has the worst red zone defense out of all of them. I'm going to take Kansas State to win this game. Yeah, they're going on the road playing a good Kansas team that I think they have played some really good football at home, but they're just a more complete team than Kansas. They got a better defense. You can get off the field in third down situations. You can get stops in the red zone. I don't know how many stops Kansas defense is going to be able to pull off in this game. You kind of have to cross your fingers and pray to God that Kansas can find ways to get stops on defense. Now, their defense has the capability of being able to show up and get a couple of big stops in this game. But, you don't really know what you're going to get out of this defense on a week-to-week basis. This defense definitely is better than what they had last year. Their defense couldn't do anything right. But going against a Kansas State team that's starting to hit their stride, outside of that loss against Texas, which they probably could have won that game if they kind of had a little bit more of a pass rush and the ball would have bounced in their direction late in that game. But for the most part, Kansas State, I think with them having a better coaching staff, them having a more complete team than Kansas, offensively, both of these two teams are evenly matched. But defensively, Kansas State obviously has a huge advantage. And Jason Bean is just too inconsistent for me to trust him in a game like this. Although I do like Kansas running backs, I don't trust Jason Bean to be able to play good enough or consistently enough for 4 quarters for Kansas to pull off the win. Give me Kansas State with the win. I'm taking them to get the victory. 34-24 is my final score prediction for this matchup.